What's up everyone, it's ENDYMION, and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is officially out for everyone to enjoy. I hope you're having fun with it. I already sank around 8 hours into it and I'm having a blast, dude. Having played the original on PS1 multiple times, getting the platinum for the remaster, remake, and intergrade, yeah, you could say 7 is one of, if not my favorite game of all time. So I'm glad whether you're a series veteran like myself or a new fan that you're having a blast playing it. But like always with Celebration comes Damnation, and there's some things to go over in this video considering Rebirth and more. From websites demanding representation, fans being blamed for games' failures for not embracing diversity, and even some sweet baby nonsense, so let's get into it. First, let's start with thegamer.com, who at this point seems to frequent this channel more often these days with their article titled, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth proves black representation in gaming is a choice. TheGamer.com has released this article that at first glance seems like a celebration of Rebirth. But if you actually read what's said in the article, they seem to be more demanding than being thankful. The beginning of the article says that fans are racist towards diversity in all forms when it comes to video games. And right away, this opinion is a huge red flag, considering I already know what this article is trying to push. Which is that they're trying to paint the image that fans, and what they really mean is straight white male fans, to be racist against diversity. This argument, however, in this case holds no water, since JRPGs are at their inception made in Japan for Japanese audiences first. Especially considering Rebirth is obviously a remake of the first disc of Final Fantasy VII. I guarantee you when Squaresoft was making 7 back in the 90s, sure they were thinking of Western audiences, but largely speaking, they catered to their home country of Japan, and I mean, who could blame them? 7 was made by Japanese people, in a time where wokeness never really existed for a Japanese-made console in the form of PlayStation. Yet they still added characters like Barrett Wallace anyways, but it felt natural and not at all forced in my opinion. What's bizarre is this article then tries to say that fans are racist because of the failure of a previous Square Enix title in the form of Forspoken, which came out around this time last year, yet the review scores and hype surrounding Forspoken compared to Rebirth is completely opposite. And that apparently is cause Frey, the main character of Forspoken, is black, because like always journalists only see things for skin-deep reasons. They then link this article from Eurogamer back in early 2023 which was titled, Black Girl Gamers J.Ann Lopez on the Importance of Black Representation in Fantasy. And it unironically has a sub-headline that says Black Girl Magic. Mind you, this article came out months before the Marvels had their infamous Nick Fury uttering the same line. But you couldn't write a more on-the-nose self-owned joke like this if you tried. Anyway, in that article, a lady named J.Ann Lopez was interviewed about black representation and why Forspoken failed. They said in their own words the reason for this was, and I quote, in the gaming industry, there are these dude bros that come out of the woodwork whenever they feel like black and brown people are stepping out of their place. They feel they own the gaming industry and gaming culture, and part of that is because gaming media outlets and publishers have allowed them to feel that way for such a long time. They feel empowered to tank a game that has a black protagonist. If it had a white person, they would probably not have felt the same way. End quote. What I think is really interesting is that Lopez was a part of a consulting team that worked on Forspoken with Square Enix. That consulting firm is called Black Girl Gamers, which obviously, as the name suggests, is a sweet baby-like consulting group that explicitly works to enforce and enrich the voices of black individuals in gaming. So, from the get-go, the entire existence of that consulting group is pretty biased as it is. And Lopez is likely pissed because not only did Forspoken fail, but because of this, they're likely not going to get any future work from Square Enix after the massive failure of Forspoken. But I think the real reason why Forspoken failed, whereas Rebirth is winning, has nothing to do with it having black characters in it or not. Because by definition, Barrett existing and having a huge role in Rebirth rejects this notion entirely. And if fans were racist, they would have boycotted Rebirth or the original 7 way back when cause Barrett is in the game. Not to mention, the very first boss battle in 7 has Cloud and Barrett facing off against a giant robot Scorpion together, so Barrett is playable from the very beginning. And Barrett is intrinsically tied to the DNA and experience of Final Fantasy VII, and fans love him as much as they do now as they did back then. Also, let's not pretend that characters like Fran in Final Fantasy XII weren't also beloved as well, as both a sex symbol and a really cool character too. And you can't even pull the sexism card on Final Fantasy or Squaresoft fans either, since many argue that the best Final Fantasy in the series is 6, which stars Terra, who is obviously a woman. And then there's Lightning, another female protagonist who got her own trilogy of games. And one of the highest rated Final Fantasies ever is 12, which, yeah, sure, you do play as Vaughn in the beginning, but many would argue that it's really Ash who is the main character of that story, and again, she's also a woman. So attempting to paint the Square Enix fanbase, or JRPG fans in general, as either racist or sexist, it's not going to work. Neither this time or any in the future, by the way, because what these idiots don't realize, like this Lopez lady who works for a firm called Black Girl Gamers, which is a ridiculous name, but it proves that they're just mad that the thing they consulted on sucked. And if people didn't like Frey because of her crass dialogue, annoying personality, and unlikable opinions, the only reason for all of this and more is because of a consultation firm like Black Girl Gamers in the first place being attached to it. After all, if nobody liked Frey and a bunch of Japanese developers paid a group of black women who were apparently experts in being black to help them make their protagonist great, and all your consulting did was end up making an unlikable asshole with no redeeming qualities, then it sounds like your consulting firm is a sham, you're all terrible at your jobs, and you should probably change careers. You can't blame fans for rejecting your nonsense when clearly everything you did was terrible to begin with. But demanding that games like Rebirth and future releases need to have diversity and inclusivity is part of the problem, and a big reason why the gaming industry, as well as movies and more, are where they are right now. Too much focus is being placed on checking boxes ensuring there's enough of this group or that one instead of the things that really matter, which is quality of product and of course gameplay. Because regardless of whatever game we're talking about, can we all agree that gameplay is and always will be king? Because it doesn't matter what video game you're playing, what's the point if it isn't fun? That's like making music that isn't good to listen to, or making movies that are on purpose deliberately boring and drawn out. If you make bad music or a boring movie, it's not your audience's fault that it failed. It is, and always will be, the error of the people who conceived the ideas at their inception and followed through to the end with the finished product. Besides, the entire concept of many JRPGs bucked this trend to begin with. Since many of the characters like Cloud, Sephiroth, and more, they look like a fusion of European and Asian features. So by definition, why has any Japanese-made video game resonated with Japanese players foremost if many of these characters don't look exactly like them to begin with? Could it be that Japanese fans are deliberately racist and prefer these European-esque influenced Japanese characters over their own? Or could it be that none of this really matters, and what really determines success is the quality of the product and the characters being fleshed out instead? Obviously, it's the second option, because otherwise every single character in 7 would be a black-haired Japanese person, yet that's obviously not the case. And there's really nothing wrong with that. Plus, you have literal robot cats on the team or a flaming dog, yet people love those characters too. It's almost as if you don't need to see yourself in a character in order to connect with them. And what matters more is the content of their character, their journey, and their actual characteristics that matter more than anything else. Why stupid consulting firms like Black Girl Gamers failed with Forspoken was because from the get-go, their initiative and existence is pointless to begin with. You exist to enforce black voices, yet when given the chance at a big AAA game, your end result was an insufferable asshole with Marvel-esque dialogue that feels more like a villain half the time than a hero. At that point, you can't blame the fans for how someone like Frey was made in Forspoken. Because it's crazy that I need to say this, but guess what? Me and everyone watching this, we had zero input on the creation of Forspoken. The entire concept of you need someone who looks like the character to make them so they're authentic is moronic to begin with. The most influential pop culture black character right now is Black Panther, and guess what? He was made by two old white guys in a studio apartment smoking cigarettes and eating bagels. Yet that character, and the entire concept of Wakanda, was not made with any black person involved. Yet nowadays, Black Panther and Wakanda are basically the new Jesus for black people, and they champion the concept and love it. And what's hilarious to me is following the release of both Black Panther and its sequel, Google searches skyrocketed for flights to Wakanda, if you can believe it. I'm not kidding you, dude. There was enough people out there in the world who unironically thought Wakanda was somehow a real place they never heard of until the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This is a level of stupidity we're fighting back against, but again, Wakanda isn't real. Sorry to break it to you. But regardless, Wakanda and Black Panther were not made by black creators. Which kind of proves the point that you don't need to look like or sometimes even understand the intricacies of any given society or country in order to make a character or concept. I'm sure Stan Lee was not a master in the history of Africa when he made Black Panther with Jack Kirby, and that's fine. And this entire concept of consulting firms these days attempting to paint themselves as experts in being able to bring characters to life in future products because they're the same skin color or whatever, it's hilarious to me. It's why it's led to things like recently there's now a search engine mod where you can now filter out games on Steam that are tied to Sweet Baby Inc. So players can be told ahead of time whether a game is marked with the stain of identity politics prior to purchasing it. Which is hilarious to me, but good to know that the public has become ever increasingly more aware of the existence of stuff like Sweet Baby. And hopefully, this video now makes you aware of other nonsense like black girl gamers as well. What's funny is that in the same article about diverse representation in Rebirth, the writer admits that JRPGs have been for a long time a fan-favorite genre of black and brown gamers. But if that's the case, then clearly, even without forced diversity, these products are still liked by these groups regardless for years now. Let's not forget how many black or Latino people out there absolutely love the ever-loving shit out of stuff like Dragon Ball Z or Naruto or One Piece. I know for sure there is someone watching this right now who is black or Hispanic that has a Dragon Ball tattoo, or they're wearing a shirt with some anime stuff on it right now watching this. And I can confidently guarantee at least 100 of you watching this right now have at some point in your lives stood in your garage or a field and screamed autistically, believing if you got mad enough and flexed hard enough, you'd turn Super Saiyan. And don't feel bad if you did, by the way, because I'm right there with you. I did it too. I would scream like a lunatic, but the point is that people love stuff like DBZ, One Piece, Naruto, and whatever else, even though they don't look like Goku or Luffy. The embrace of anime within these cultures proves that it's not the skin or the look of a character that matters, but what they represent in their stories that actually resonate with people. Yet what places like The Gamer, Black Girl Gamers, or Sweet Baby would have you believe is that all that really matters is the skin color or gender of a character, and that should be enough for products or stories to be accepted and awarded. But that's also a big reason why we're having these problems to begin with. Characters like Cloud or Barrett or Tifa are beloved because of their character. Sure, having massive mommy milkers or a big ass sword that weighs about as much as I do is cool and all, but none of that matters if the characters aren't good themselves. Look at the past, and I'm sure you can find plenty of forgettable protagonists in subpar JRPGs or animes with spiky hair and a big sword attempting to emulate Cloud's stride from VII. But the reason why those pale imitations fail whereas Cloud soars is because besides looking iconic, Cloud is an interesting character with relatable qualities. And that's the whole point of this, by the way, and what these idiots keep forgetting, and it's why they continue to fail. Representation is being misinterpreted within the eyes and brains of these woke morons. They believe representation is a physical-only concept. But what they don't realize is that true representation is that of what's beneath the skin and what really connects all human beings together. Otherwise, a story like Rebirth or the original VII would not have resonated so broadly for so long if it wasn't for its authentic representation, which is that of the human soul, of tragedy, pain, chaos, bravery, joy, and victory. By making a cast of characters like in VII and other games, Square and their devs created a story and world that has lasted for 27 years because of its message and themes. A great story with compelling characters is all that really matters in the end. The skin color or shade of clothing means little to anyone, and the existence of VII or stuff like Goku and Naruto proves that time and again. This writer for The Gamer then decides to trick their own mind into believing their own lies where they say this: Final Fantasy VII Remake was the first time I realized that the argument of black people not being included in JRPGs was farcical. By the way, farcical means fake, so they're basically saying that they believe the argument of not having enough black people within VII or any other game is fake and not true. But again, it's so dumb, especially since they rope Final Fantasy XVI into this as well, where they say this. While the same could have and should have been done for Final Fantasy XVI, the exclusion due to historical accuracy, according to Naoki Yoshida, is just an example of the limited scope of understanding held by that specific team and their decision. This stems from that big controversy where journals got butthurt because 16 featured little diversity and was predominantly full of white European-looking people. Yet of course, like I've said previously in other videos, the reasoning for why everyone looks similar is tied to the actual history of the world itself. And when you've played it, you'd realize that, but of course, it's still not good enough. And we all know that if 16 were all black people without an ounce of white, it would be praised and championed instead. And the argument of why does everyone look the same or where's the diversity would magically disappear. Because what these journals are really saying is that it's only a problem with diversity when something doesn't adhere to their needs and wants exclusively. They're hypocrites is what I'm saying, and they tell on themselves all the time without realizing it. Then this writer again proves why they don't know what they're talking about, where they bring up Yakuza Like a Dragon and the broader series where they say this. My biggest complaint was the representation of black characters. I wasn't expecting to see black people walking around Yokohama, but I couldn't help but frown that every interaction with black characters was an enemy thug with bandanas over their mouths, holding their guns sideways at the gang, a ridiculous caricature. So you're mad that a game set in Japan, which is almost completely inhabited by Japanese people, is bad because there's no black people in it. And you're also mad that a game that predominantly deals with the criminal underworld elements of Japan in the fact that the series is quite literally called Yakuza before it was rebranded to Like a Dragon, has the characters within it engaging with and facing off against crime and thugs across the city's landscapes. You see what I mean, fellas? You can't win with these sorts of people ever. It's genuinely never enough, no matter what you do regardless. And here's my stance on all of this. I don't care who the developer is or what studio is in any part of the world that we're talking about. The point is that regardless of anything, nobody owes you anything because of who you are. I know that might sound uncomfortable to hear for some, but it needs to be said. Whether you're white, black, or anything else, the world does not owe you anything simply because you exist. And no company, video game, or any product needs to bend over backwards to appeal your moronic self-imposed state of importance. Video games have largely gotten worse these past 10 years because of the fact these vocal minority groups demand all of these insane things. And because of it, that's why this industry is falling apart, amongst other things. Games are already too expensive to make as is, they take years to develop, and on top of all of the already near impossible demands that players want from their games. They want them to be huge, be hundreds of hours long, with replayable content and so on. Then these developers have to also allocate resources and budget to these moronic consulting groups to ensure they don't get upset and piss themselves crying because of all the arbitrary reasons I've explained in this video already. The point is that where this industry is going with all the layoffs and implosions across the board is proving that the people in charge of a lot of these things are starting to realize what they've been doing is not working. Whether it's the fact too many of these games cost way too much to make or how pandering results in no sales, and more, we're seeing proof in again that none of these things are good for the industry. And there was this one tweet, which is now deleted because of course it was, but don't worry fellas, I got myself a copy of it anyway. It's from someone who works in the game industry. By the way, don't harass them or anything, but here's what they said considering the layoffs and tonal changes surrounding video games right now. The games industry is about to be only a white guy and his 5 white guy friends making a game at this point. They obviously thought they did something with this tweet, saying that a lot of the layoffs are clearly internally from diversity hires. But here's my base question to this tweet. Is that so bad? I don't think so. I think the gaming industry is learning the hard way that by hiring people via their identity or skin color over their actual talent, well, you're seeing the results in real time. I'm not saying anyone besides white men should work in games, by the way, because you know someone will think that. But is it really bad if the industry is hiring people based on actual genuine talent instead of identity going forward? I personally don't think so, and it can only be a good thing in the long run. You want a great example of hiring based on talent instead of identity? Go compare the Arkham games to Suicide Squad. I'm not saying black people or women or whatever can't work in games. But just get people who are great at what they do. Yoko Shimomura is a woman who's done music for plenty of games like Kingdom Hearts, Final Fantasy, and her most recent game she's doing music for is Renatus. She's a woman working in games, but again, who cares if she's a woman? She proves she belongs being in her position as a world-renowned composer because she's amazing at what she does. Dude, to this day, I still listen to the Final Fantasy XV soundtrack from time to time. Seriously, go listen to Veiled in Black or Somnus from 15. Obviously, I can't play those songs here because of copyright. Or listen to the Kingdom Hearts theme. Those are all Shimomura's work is what I'm saying. Your gender and identity don't matter even a little bit if you're talented. We need to stop this moronic push for gender nonsense and forced representation in Final Fantasy and beyond, like this Gamer article and more explains. If through all of this turmoil, this industry can return to a new golden era where great games are being made by qualified people who are actually competent at their jobs, then really, is that not a good thing? I do agree that budgets are overblown and we do need the AAA industry to scale back. And a good way of reducing those budgets is likely by not hiring consulting firms that go out of their way to ruin your projects. I'm just saying, it's a thought. But it's clear with the success of Rebirth, both commercially and critically and beyond, that players just simply don't care about checking boxes anymore. And all we really want in the end is good quality games that respect our time and money. And if that's too much to ask for, you have to honestly ask yourself, why are you in the game industry? Or any other industry for that matter, if those things are not your top priorities. The gaming industry is not in a good place right now from layoffs and more, but maybe it can heal itself from these grievous wounds in due time. I guess time will tell, but let me know what you think as always. Thank you for watching, subscribe, like, and share the video, and thanks to my patrons. Make video games great again. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next one.